I'm here.
Stay here.
Whatever you want to do, Bob.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm pleased to be here with my colleagues, Senator Casey, Senator Cardin, Senator Durbin, and Senator Coons, to talk about the need to pass the START treaty this month before we go home for the holidays and before the end of this session of Congress. There is bipartisan consensus among national security experts that New START is in our national security interest. We have a list of validators, but it covers virtually everyone, Republican and Democrat, in the national security, military, and foreign policy establishment. They support this treaty because they understand that right now it has been 376 days since we've had inspectors on the ground in Russia looking at what's going on with Russia's nuclear arsenal. So all of this begs the question, what's behind the continued resistance to address the treaty? The majority of the arguments that I've heard against this treaty are arguments about process and politics. There is widespread support on the substance of this treaty. So for senators to be voting no for political reasons is just irresponsible. Regarding process, I think it's important to review and to provide a historical context for what's happened on previous START treaties. First of all, since the treaty was signed in April, the entire treaty text has been readily available to senators, and it has not changed. So anyone who wanted to look at the treaty since April has been able to do that. There have been over 20 hearings that have been held. The administration has answered over 900 questions. Now, I know that there are senators who are taking the responsibility to address this issue seriously, and I respect that. We're all committed to making sure that there is time to address the issues raised by START on the floor. But again, I think we should put this in some historical context, because START 1, the first START treaty, was the first of its kind. It was more complicated than the treaty that's before us, and yet it only took 5 days of floor time. START 2 took 2 days. The SORT treaty took 2 days. We have more than 2 days between now and the end of this session. When the Senate considered the treaty around conventional forces in Europe, it took 2 days. The Chemical Weapons Convention agreement took 2 days. The fact is, we have time to consider this treaty. It's in the country's national security interest. And General James Cartwright today, who is the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said, and I quote, "All the Joint Chiefs are very much behind the treaty. We need START, and we need it badly." And I would just add to that, we need it now, before the end of the year, before the end of this session. Thank you. Senator Casey.
Thank you, Senator Shaheen. I wanted to make 3 points. First of all, the ratification of this treaty, I think, is central to our national security. We are indeed less safe if ratification doesn't occur. There's no question about that. That's why you have such a broad consensus in the national security community. Every living Secretary of State has weighed in on this. Former President George Herbert Walker Bush, and so many others. We could go down the list. There is no question that the ratification of this treaty is in our national security interests. And I would hope that those who are saying that this is not the time would consider just a couple of points. First of all, just on verification. I think the American people would rather that we have in place a tough verification system like the one in this treaty. Just to give you some basic highlights. In this treaty, it's a five-pronged approach to verification. First, invasive on-site inspections. Second, national technical means, giving us the ability to use our technology to monitor and verify. Third, unique identifiers placed on each weapon. Fourth, regular data exchange. And fifth, prompt notification of the movement of weapons. Americans should have a right to expect that their government has in place a mechanism, in this case a treaty, to provide that kind of verification. So there's no question this is about our national security. Second, nothing in this treaty and nothing that will result from this treaty will disturb or undermine in any way our nuclear arsenal, in the sense that it will continue to be safe, secure, and effective. This does make us safer if we ratify. And the third point I'd make is just a basic point about peace of mind. We're debating this issue and talking about ratification of this critically important treaty to actually reduce the number of nuclear weapons pointed at America. And we do that in the context or at a time frame within which we're living through the worst economy in 75 or so years. People are very anxious about their jobs, about their family's income, about their economic future. It's a time of real anxiety. Ratification of this treaty, among many reasons to have it ratified, would give people some peace of mind that at least on something as important to our national security, folks in Washington can come together, can make an agreement, as we've done in the past on treaties like this, which will indeed make us safer and be in the best interest of our national security.
Let me first thank Senator Shaheen and my colleagues that are here to give us this opportunity to talk about the critical importance of the ratification of the New START Treaty. It was a hot summer day that I remember some of my colleagues on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee urging Senator Kerry to give them just a little bit more time so that we could have an orderly process for the consideration of the ratification of the New START. So Senator Kerry gave them a little bit more time. And it's the same senators who are now complaining that they don't have enough time on a cold, snowy day in December. So I think I want to first compliment Senator Kerry and Senator Lugar for the manner in which they have handled this issue. It has been fully considered by the United States Senate through the numerous hearings that we've had, through the incredible number of questions for the record. My understanding somewhere around 900 were posed for the record, all of which have been answered thoroughly. The information is before us. It's now time for the Congress, for the United States Senate, to take up its responsibility to consider and vote on the ratification of the New START Treaty. Now, to me, this is critically important to get done. Verification is perhaps the most important aspect from the United States national security position. We need to have boots on the ground to know what Russia is doing in regards to its strategic arsenal. We don't have those boots on the ground today. We don't have the verification system in place, and it's critically important for U.S. national security that we have that. But I want to just mention one other point. There are two countries that have significant nuclear capacity, and that's the United States and Russia. It's important for the United States to lead in the reduction of strategic arms weapons, and that's what this treaty is about. But it also places the United States in an international leadership position with credibility to deal with nonproliferation issues. And one of our most critical foreign policy challenges is to prevent Iran from becoming a nuclear weapon state. We've had the support of Russia in the Security Council on sanctions against Iran. I really do think that the ratification of the New START Treaty is critically important for our national security for the United States to be able to continue to work with Russia to enforce nonproliferation and to go against those rogue states that want to become nuclear weapon powers. That's in jeopardy if we don't ratify the New START Treaty. So I am pleased that Leader Reid is sticking with our schedule. I hope that our colleagues will allow us to consider and vote in a timely way. It's critically important that we get this done before the end of this Congress.
I want to thank Senator Shaheen and my colleagues for joining me today. The patron saint of the modern Republican Party is Ronald Reagan. And when he was president of the United States, he said when it came to international relationships, trust but verify. For 376 days, we have been unable to verify that the nuclear arsenal in Russia is either safe or treaty compliant. I would hope that these Republican senators who are trying to slow this down or stop it would remember Ronald Reagan's words. Verification is critical for the safety of the United States and the safety of the world. The second point I would like to make is this. There have been 20 different Senate hearings, almost 1,000 questions asked. Over the course of the last year and a half, Senator Kyle, whom I personally acknowledge as far more expert in this field than I am, has had ample opportunity to meet with the President, the Vice President, the Secretary of Defense, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and experts from all across this administration. They have not ignored his questions. In fact, they've taken them very seriously. They've given him assurances, they've changed language, they've worked with him all the way through this process in a good faith effort so that we could end up with a strong bipartisan support of this historic treaty. At the end of the day, one from their ranks, Senator Richard Lugar, stepped forward and said it's time to vote for this. Is there any person in the Senate, maybe not in the United States, who really has more respect than Richard Lugar when it comes to this question of nuclear proliferation? With Sam Nunn, Richard Lugar wrote the book. Basically said to the world, let's be safer by verifying the arsenals and making certain that they are not going to be the victims of accidental misfire. Richard Lugar has stepped forward and says now's the time to pass the New START treaty. He's right. And one other thing. When it comes to these issues of international importance and national security, partisanship needs to stop at the edge of our waters, at the ocean's edge. We need to really basically pull together, and I think Richard Lugar has called for that, and I thank him for that. Along with Senator John Kerry, they have shown a strong bipartisan face for the ratification of this treaty. Another point which I would like to make, and I think is very clear, is that we began the debate on this yesterday. Do you know how many amendments have been offered by the critics of the New START treaty in the first 24 hours, brought to the floor for a vote? None. But speaker after speaker comes up on the Republican side and said, well, I want to take my hour to say we just don't have enough time to talk about this treaty. We have enough time. Historically, we have more than enough time to ratify this treaty and consider it seriously, to consider any serious amendments that might be offered to this treaty. But to merely come before us day after day and say, we're just going to run out of time here, we're never going to have enough time, they have the time. They have the opportunity. The question is whether they have the will to make America safer. A strong relationship with Russia is the best guarantee we have that we will have a partner in dealing with the threat of nuclear expansion of Iran, that we will have a new partner in the NATO talks about missile defense, something 2 or 3 weeks ago you never would have dreamed of. But the Russians came to that meeting and started talking to us about an issue which they had for years avoided. They've been engaged now. We need to continue that engagement for the peace of the world and the safety of the United States. And we need to give our president the tools to work with to keep us safe. The New START treaty is one of those tools.
As the newest member of both the Armed Services and Foreign Relations Committees, I wanted to join in this press conference just to add my perspective on it. I want to thank Senator Shaheen for calling this press conference and Chairman Kerry for his disciplined and determined leadership in the consideration of this important treaty. And I'm here to urge all of my colleagues to support the ratification of the New START treaty, which, as you've heard, I think is critical to sustaining America's 3 decades of leadership in a strategic relationship with Russia that steadily is moving towards, I believe, a safer world. As you heard from Senator Casey, this treaty has a strong and broad verification and inspection regime. As you heard from Senator Shaheen, we've been out of inspection with Russia for 376 days, and this treaty would allow us to resume inspections on the ground. As you heard from Senator Cardin, nuclear proliferation is one of the greatest threats facing us in the world today, and the United States and Russia, through this treaty, will continue to win, I think, reasoned credibility in the world if we continue to make progress towards managing the responsible reduction of our nuclear stockpiles. And last, as you heard from Senator Durbin, a critical question is, why continue to delay? Why on the floor literally this afternoon has there been hours spent without any meaningful amendments presented, without any real questions posed about this treaty? I was not here for the 18 hearings by the Foreign Relations and Armed Services Committees, but I am persuaded by the long list of leaders in national security from both parties who have testified in support of this treaty. Senator Shaheen mentioned in the opening that there is united support from the Joint Chiefs and from the national security leaders of our country of both parties going back decades. I think the time is now to move to ratification. On the floor just in the past hour, the question was raised whether those newly elected to the Senate should not be given an opportunity to review all of the records and to have the hearings held all over again for them in the 112th Congress. And in close, I'll simply say no. I think it is possible for a newly sworn member of the Senate to be fully satisfied, as I am, that this treaty is in America's best interests, and I urge all of my colleagues to move swiftly to consideration and passage of the New START treaty. Thank you, Senator Shaheen.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Questions? Yes.
Senator DeMint has criticized Democrats for, quote, dual tracking this with the omnibus bill. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time. I think the Senate can consider more than one issue at a time, and in fact, there's historic precedent. As we have dealt with treaties in the past, we have done other things, and we've got a rundown of dates and times and issues that we can share with everybody that will give you that historic context. And I don't know, for Senator Durbin, you have been here the longest. Do you want to put
Well, let me just add this point.
other context?
Some Republicans, and I believe Senator DeMint may have been in this chorus, saying that this lame duck session has gone on too long and we are desecrating the spirit of Christmas. With the cooperation of the Republican side, we can do our job, do it well, and do it in a more time-efficient way. And clearly we can deal with two issues at once. When you consider all the time spent in quorum calls in this place, wasting time that should have been spent in active debate or consideration of amendments, this is a classic example. As Senator Shaheen has said, history's on our side. We can take the 2, 3, 4 days, whatever is necessary, to do the right job for the START treaty debate, and still not let our government close down come Saturday night, which is when the continuing resolution ends. I wouldn't want to have to make that trade. I want America to be safe, but I sure don't want to shut down our government either. Those are two things we're facing immediately.
Senator Durbin, given the current process with the dual tracking and the likelihood that you guys will be in this weekend, what day next week do you anticipate the START debate coming to a close and having the final vote?
We're not in control of that. At this point, if members continue to offer amendments and speak, this could go on for some time. But I think the best we can do is to offer a reasonable opportunity to members of both parties who in good faith will come to the floor to express their feelings on this agreement, to offer an amendment and bring it to a vote. If that is done in a good faith effort, I'm convinced we can finish it in a reasonable time early next week and maybe go home for the holiday season.
Yes.
Senator Durbin, I just wanted to follow up on that. I'm hearing now that the Republicans aren't interested in bringing any amendments today and probably not until another day of debate at least. I'm just curious how far along you guys are going to allow them to go with this until you're interested in calling a cloture vote.
You know, it becomes pretty obvious, doesn't it? This isn't about offering amendments or changing this or even challenging any of the provisions. This is about delaying the ultimate passage of this critical treaty for the safety of the United States. I had thought that perhaps this week started with a much more bipartisan feel to it on the vote on the tax agreement, that we were going to move in a progressive and constructive way to get things done. But if they won't even offer amendments and are just trying to stall us into the Christmas holiday, I'm afraid that's not consistent with that same spirit.
And listen, let me just point out that the resolution on ratification that passed through the Foreign Relations Committee back in September was a bipartisan resolution. That was a bipartisan vote. It included even language that Senator DeMint worked on. So I think Senator Durbin raises the question, what's the real issue here? Is it real, genuine concern about what's in the treaty, or is it an effort to delay, to keep something from happening for political reasons? And if that's the case, then that's certainly irresponsible.
Senator Durbin, is President Obama doing anything specifically to help encourage this along?
Oh, I want to tell you, this president has worked so hard to open this opportunity, and he knew that his time was limited. He has been urging leaders on both sides. He and Vice President Biden have worked overtime. The meetings that they've had with Republican senators trying to bring along the support for this, I've never seen a more concentrated effort. They're taking it very seriously because it is a very serious issue. It's about the safety and security of the United States.
Senator Durbin, can I ask you to just walk us through, though, how you're going to get to, at some point, it sounds like Senator Reid is going to bring up the omnibus tonight. So how will that work? So can you walk us through sort of omnibus, or if you need a short-term CR to keep the government from shutting down
Well,
Saturday night?
as you know, Saturday night, the current CR expires. And so we need to do something, pass some legislation to make sure that we don't jeopardize the working of the government. And we're hoping to have a vote on Saturday if Leader Reid files this motion this evening. And we will determine then whether or not we're going to have an omnibus appropriation bill or some other means of keeping the government functioning. We won't know until the vote comes up. It's very close.
But what if there's a reading? I mean, you have to read the bill before you can file cloture. So
Well, I would hope that those senators who have talked about the desecration of the spirit of Christmas would understand that reading bills is a total waste of time. The omnibus appropriation bill has now been posted on the internet for 48 hours. Even a slow-reading senator could be working their way through it by Saturday. And I would hope that they wouldn't try to throw these obstacles in our path, either when it comes to the New START treaty or to the omnibus. Okay?
Thank you all very much.
Thanks. Well done, Chris.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Gene. Well done.
Thank you.